Hello everyone and welcome to White Sunset. Freddy Krueger is without a doubt my favourite horror villain, from the creativity that comes from his many inventive ways to kill his victims, to his joking yet dark personality. From psycho clown to dream demon, Freddy Krueger is truly an ingenious creation. The concept of someone being able to kill you through your dreams is something truly unique and horrifying. And given my fascination with dream-based stories, Freddy is the perfect villain for me. What do I mean by fascination with dream-based stories? Well, that stems back to media I've consumed for my entire life. My first introduction to a dream-based villain came from watching the first season of Charmed when I was only 6 years old, and seeing a man stalking Prue through her dreams and trying to kill her. Her desperation to stay awake so she wouldn't fall victim to this dream stalker is something that truly stuck with me for the last 17 years. The way the dream world was styled was always so eye-drawing to me, and even though now I see the cheap sets for what they are, I still think that the set design crew did an amazing job with the limited budget they were given. And I still envision those dream sequences to this very day. Moving on a few years at age 11 watching Supernatural, the brothers were fighting against a man with the power to enter dreams to kill people. The villain himself wasn't much of a standout for me, but the bizarreness of the world, such as rain falling upwards instead of down, and the psychological warfare like being confronted with a demonic version of himself, is another instance of elements of dream-based stories sticking with me from my adolescence. When I was 14, I began reading a book series with a fantastical villain for my dream-obsessed brain. This book series and villain was so impactful on me that my first tattoo was a symbol ripped straight out of the pages. The Sword of Truth series, from Book 3 The Blood of the Fold to Book 11 Confessor, features a villain very similar to one Freddy Krueger. Jagang the Great is a Dreamwalker. As a Dreamwalker, he need only telepathically enter your mind while you are asleep, and he will possess full control of your body and mind as he sees fit. Through his many decades of life, he has amassed an army of over 2 million soldiers he has complete control over. Even if he chooses not to control your body at any given time, he can still see and hear what you see and hear, and you never know that he is in your mind until he takes control of you. He need only think you dead and your brain activity will stop and you will collapse to the ground. For 8 books, this monster dominated the Midlands and Tahara, and every time he would appear in a chapter I was drawn right into the story. That brings us to the reason for this video. The horror series with a villain who almost perfectly resembles what I love in an evil character. A unique and instantly recognisable design, a dark and twisted past, a sense of humour that doesn't overshadow his evil deeds, and finally, a unique and terrifying power that allows him to kill you at your most vulnerable. Nightmares 1 through 3 gave us a true horror villain, and despite how much I honestly and unironically love Dream Master and Dream Child, I still see the issues that plague them, and I'm here to offer a solution to the franchise that lets it end the killing spree of the most iconic burn victim with some dignity and grace. The issue that this franchise and all 70s and 80s horror icons suffer from comes from a loose grasp of continuity. A tighter formed string of events that follow the same basic logic are what make franchises last longer and not devolve their star characters into parodies of themselves. With that in mind, the way I am going to attempt to fix the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is to set events in place that lead to a complete bookended story. To begin, we need to cut down on the amount of films in the core continuity. From the original 1984 film with Nancy Thompson to the death battle between Freddy and Jason in 2003, there are 7 films in the core franchise with New Nightmare as its own unconnected story. We are going to limit this down to 4 movies. That means Nightmare 2 Freddy's Revenge, Nightmare 5 Dream Child, and Nightmare 6 Freddy's Dead are all going to be removed in favour of this new continuity consisting of the original movie, Dream Warriors, and to close off this trilogy, we will have the reimagining of the Dream Master, with Freddy vs Jason as an extra treat a couple decades down the line, as a love letter to the franchises. So let's not delay any further and get into my changes for the Dream Master. We open up where else but a boiler room. We hear Freddy's laughter as a young man seen from behind runs from the deadly Dream Demon. As Freddy continues to stalk his prey, we steadily begin to get glimpses of his victim's face until he is trapped at the dead end of this labyrinth of scalding hot pipes. The face of the young man turning around in fear to meet his tormentor is Glenn Lance, played once again by Johnny Depp. Freddy's glove reaches out and rips off Glenn's head, leaving a gruesome spray of blood decorating the walls while his soul returns to Freddy's body, joining the dozens of other victims Freddy has accumulated over the years. As Freddy laughs and taunts his revolving door of victims, all trapped within his burned and deformed body, he reaches his bladed glove into his chest and pulls out another of his past victims, Philip, who was last seen in Dream Warriors as a human marionette. Freddy's chilling laugh is heard as the camera zooms past him and through a cold and dormant boiler, into the film's title card. We then cut to Kristen, and the scene that follows mirrors the opening dream sequence in the original Dream Master, following Kristen through the Elm Street house until she is filled with so much fear that she pulls Joey and Kincaid into her dreams. They all converge at the old dormant boiler in the basement. To prove a point, Kincaid shows no ounce of fear, putting his hand on the boiler which elicits no response. Freddy is dead, he isn't coming back. A hesitant Kristen follows suit and places her shaking hand on the boiler. A meek smile spreads on her face as nothing happens. But when she and the other Dream Warriors leave, a red handprint begins to glow where Kristen just touched it, which then morphs into the handprint of Freddy's glove, and a low menacing laugh is heard from inside the boiler as it roars to life with a bright yellow flame. Cutting to morning time, we meet Alice in her house as Kristen comes to pick her and her brother Rick up for school, Rick being Kristen's boyfriend. Alice is a meek and shy girl who lacks all forms of confidence. Her mind often trails off into fantasies of herself being brave and confident, but never has the drive to act on what she truly wants to say. Arriving at school, we see Joey talking with a young asthmatic girl, Sheila, where a stereotypical jock character comments about Sheila's use of her inhaler.
Hey baby, you're sucking on the wrong nozzle.
This is where Joey is taking the place of Debbie in this version, as Debbie was never really a character and more of a device for the special effects team to have some fun. So in the following clip you're about to see, imagine Joey being the one saying this line.
Hey yo, Needle Dick. I bet you're the only male in this school suffering from penis envy.
This shows a character progression for Joey, as during the majority of the last film he was too afraid of Freddy to so much as say a single word. But with his fear of Freddy gone, he is all too willing to speak up to people. Joey sees Kristen arrive and gives Sheila a kiss goodbye so he and Kincaid can confront Kristen about last night and ask that she stop pulling them into her dreams. Kristen is clearly upset by this and walks away from her friends with shame plastered on her face. As this is happening, Alice and Rick go to meet a couple of their friends. This is really where the benefit of hindsight comes in handy when writing this adaptation, as I'm able to pick and choose my favourite characters from the later films and plant them into Dream Master. As the twins approach their friends, we meet a deaf guy, Carlos, and an aspiring graphic novel artist, Mark. Now, I know with the mention of Mark, you're all probably thinking the same thing.
Super Freddy sucks!
But don't worry, Super Freddy is not making an appearance. I have something much different in mind which gives respect to the horror icon and makes Mark's inclusion have some real weight in the climax of this story. As the twins talk to their friends, we get to know more about them. Carlos tries not to be home very often, as the abuse he suffered from his parents is what led to his hearing loss. And Mark looks to Carlos for a critique of his work, as Carlos really appreciates comics and graphic novels as his main source of entertainment. As the school day progresses, we focus in on Kristen, as weird things begin happening around her. Claw marks on the chalkboard, childish laughter that quickly dissolves into screams, the windows to the classroom suddenly beginning to tint red. She hears the dark tone of the twisted voice from her undead stalker, thanking her for calling him back, and for lighting his way home to her. She jolts awake in her sleep after a teacher slams a paper on the desk in front of her. After class, Kristen is talking with Alice, and without sharing any details about Freddy, only that she was having bad dreams, Alice suggests ways that she can make herself have better dreams and keep the bad ones away. That night, Kristen is eating with her mother, and after remarking that she has noticed that Kristen hasn't been sleeping again, she has laced her food with sleeping pills. As Kristen loses the battle to stay awake, she tries what Alice suggested earlier and wakes up on a beach. She finds this dream calm and relaxing and chooses to lie back in the sand, unaware of the misshapen fin darting towards her. A sandy explosion reveals Freddy, and Kristen stands up to confront him, only to find out the sand she was lying in has begun to swallow her whole. She falls through the beach into the Elm Street house, where she is grabbed by Freddy and forced to pull someone new into the dream with her. Being the person who gave her advice on how to have better dreams, she desperately calls out to Alice, who finds herself witnessing Kristen's gruesome murder at the hands of Freddy. As we see Kristen's soul being added to the others Freddy has killed, Alice jolts awake in her bed, drenched in sweat from fear after her nightmare. And that is the end to Act 1, with the protagonist from the last film tragically dying and passing the torch to the protagonist of this film, as well as the official return of Freddy. That morning, her and Rick are waiting for Kristen, who doesn't turn up to take them to school. This leads to their angry and alcoholic father begrudgingly taking them, where he verbally abuses them the whole way there. This then leads into one of Alice's many fantasies, where she confronts her father and puts him in his place. This, unfortunately, is just a dream, and in reality she just sits there and listens to every anger-filled word uttered by her only parental figure. Outside the school, Alice and Rick encounter Sheila, who is sat waiting for Joey. Alice talks to Sheila about the dream she had last night about the man with the burnt face. They go into a deep discussion about it when Joey arrives, who catches wind of them talking about Freddy. He interrupts their conversation asking where they heard about Freddy. Alice admits that she's never heard his name, only she saw the burned man in her dream last night. Joey asks what she saw him do, and him asking that question was so frantic that it scares the easily scareable Alice, angering Sheila so she takes Alice away and angrily snaps at her boyfriend. Joey, left alone in the courtyard of the school, breaks off running. Room by room he is looking for his friends. Pushing past people in the hallway, passing angry teachers and confused students, he frantically hunts the other Dream Warriors. He can't find Kristen or Kincaid anywhere. He fears the worst until finally entering the school he sees one of his friends. Joey desperately asks Kincaid if he's seen Kristen. Confused, he asks what's going on. Joey tells Kincaid that Alice saw Freddy last night. She dreamt about Alice, and now Kristen. He can't find Kristen. Kincaid calms Joey down, saying that Kristen was probably sick or something, that Alice could have had a dream about some other unconnected burned psycho. They killed Freddy, he's gone. It is at this point where the principal to the school approaches the two and asks that they join him in his office, where Rick is already sat waiting. We cut to Alice in class about to start taking a test. Both she and Sheila are struggling to stay awake. Alice because of her dreams last night, and Sheila because she was awake very late last night studying for this exact test. The sequence that follows is the same as the original film, where Sheila dreams about Freddy as her teacher, who grabs her and sucks the air out of her, making her resemble an asthma attack in the real world. But a dreaming Alice saw the whole thing take place, and knows that Freddy is to blame for another one of her friends' deaths. We cut back to the shocked faces of Kincaid, Joey and Rick as they hear the news of Kristen's death, that she was drugged by her mother and suffered an overdose because of it. They don't have a lot of time to come to terms with that news, as we hear sirens in the background. Joey, fearing the worst, bursts out of the principal's office to the classroom, where he sees Sheila being administered CPR to save her life. He lets out a cry of anguish, the windows to the classroom shattering in the process. All the while, Alice is crying in the corner, muttering almost incoherent words. The one word that stands out among the garbled mess is Freddy, which is overheard by Rick, who is trying to console her, and Joey, who is shaking where he stands. We cut to Rick later that day in his garage performing karate training to try to distract himself about the news about Kristen. After his dad comes home and aggressively mocks him, he goes to see Alice in her room, and the two embark on one of my favourite scenes from the original movie. This is one of the bigger changes in this adaptation. Instead of going into a romantic subplot, I am focusing more on the familial relationship between these two twins. So any scene of the original film with Alice and handsome dad would instead be replaced with scenes of the twins bonding and working to fight back against Freddy. As said before, I genuinely love Dream Master and Dream Child, which is why a lot of these scenes and interactions are the same, only really swapping out the characters. And this scene where the two twins bond is one of my favourites. The actors have a lot of chemistry together, and this scene always just makes me smile.
Just get up there and just like that, big and strong. Do it.
Sigh!
Swish.
That night, Rick is visibly having a restless sleep. As the camera looms over top, we see it slowly begin to pan towards him, and it also begins to tilt until Rick's upside down face fills the screen, where we match cut to him dangling by his ankles as he's taunted by Freddy. A few swipes of Freddy's glove open small wounds on his chest as he counts off all his victims. He gets ready to slice Rick's neck open when suddenly a shrilling scream is heard from across the room as Joey and Kincaid run in to fight Freddy. Freddy leads his hapless victim and turns to meet the two last Dream Warriors. He reaches into his chest with his bladed glove and pulls out Kristen's soul. Throwing her crying and disfigured body at the heels of Joey and Kincaid, she begs for them to take her back with them, to free her from Freddy. Before either can respond, she screams as a gust of wind pulls her back into Freddy's body to continue her suffering at the hands of the deranged Dream Demon. Kincaid and Joey are too stunned from the display to react in time, and just as Joey attempts to let out another deafening scream, a hand is suddenly found in his mouth with a firm grasp on his tongue to sever it from Joey. Not enough to kill him, it does put his power out of commission for this fight, and when Kincaid realises that he is unable to fight Freddy alone, he chooses to instead free Rick and let him run for safety. Freddy uses this opportunity to kill Joey in front of Kincaid, who up until now has shown no fear of Freddy, but the death of his last friend was enough to crush his facade and show his fear in its fullness, which is all too enticing for Freddy, who guts to the last of the Dream Warriors, while Rick watches helplessly from his hiding place. Before being woken up by Alice, who could hear him mumbling in his sleep from her room. As the twins sit and talk about losing Kristen, the mood turns from the horror of the heroes from the last film dying to a solemn and heartfelt moment where the heroes of this film sit and reflect on the loss of their girlfriend and best friend. This serves as a way to insert another scene of these characters' excellent on-screen chemistry, and to really hammer home the weight of what losing people means to them. The next day at school, Rick can't help but notice Joey and Kincaid aren't in class, and he has flashbacks to his dream of the two of them dying while saving him. He's spent the movie up to this point denying the existence of Freddy. But when the news breaks of both Dream Warriors being found dead, Rick leaves the room to find a quiet place to process everything that's happened. His girlfriend is dead, his friends are dead, he and his sister are having the same dreams about the same man with the burned face. This is all real, it has to be. Someone, something, some entity is killing people through their dreams. We cut to Alice in the courtyard with Mark and Carlos, trying to calm herself from the events of the last few days, while looking over Carlos' shoulder at the comic outlines drawn by Mark. What she sees on those pages is Mark's character, the Phantom Prowler, fighting against a demonic Freddy Krueger. Alice reacts to seeing Freddy with a scream. She tells Mark to give her the pages. This shows a progression of her meek character who let the world walk all over her, to a stronger and determined person who is doing everything she can to stop Freddy, which also catches Mark and Carlos off guard as they aren't used to seeing Alice so determined for anything. After asking why he's drawing Freddy, Mark tells her that he overheard her yesterday mumbling about Freddy. He sounded like a cool character to include in the graphic novel, and Carlos agrees that he's a fun character to read. A frustrated Alice refuses to return the pages, and Rick runs up to her after hearing her scream a moment ago. He sees the pages and approaches Mark menacingly. He tells Mark that Freddy killed dozens of kids. What right does he have to exploit something like that? He takes the pages from Alice, giving her a paper cut in the process, and tears them up in front of Mark. He tells him to get some self-respect and maybe write an original character that people actually want to read about, and not give fame to a man who laughs as he tortures and kills people. Rick's talk down to Mark sends him away, while also drawing attention from many other students who all heard Rick speaking so openly about Freddy. From everything Alice has witnessed over the last few days, knowing who Freddy is gives him the power to target you. What Rick just did to try to hide the identity of Freddy has only doomed dozens of students to death. She looks down at the floor at the scraps from the pages that Rick just tore up. The half-torn panel that lies at her feet shows Freddy clear as day, the sketched-on bladed glove smeared with blood from her paper cut. In the distance she hears Freddy's joyful laugh as he taunts her, while more blood from her cut drips down onto his face, messily colouring his burned skin into a demonic red. The face on the page morphs into a more monstrous version of Freddy, as the camera begins to zoom out, revealing an untorn comic panel resting on a desk with Mark hunched over it, redrawing Freddy, while mumbling to himself in anger about what he should have said to Rick. As he draws this new Freddy, we see him adding much more detail to the character, giving him sharper teeth, pointed ears, and a much more demonic looking burn pattern, similar to how he sometimes looks in Freddy vs Jason. As he reflects on his Freddy fan art, the drawing suddenly becomes animated as the demonic rendition of Freddy remarks on his new appearance with admiration. But then he says that he simply can't beat the classic as he turns back to his usual form. The page that the drawing was on begins to grow and fill the room until Mark finds himself in the warehouse in which he drew Freddy. As Freddy taunts him with Rick's words about his characters being pathetic and cliché, Mark fills with anger and turns around now dressed as his original character, the Phantom Prowler. Mark unloads a Punisher level of bullets into Freddy, who seemingly is unable to fight back against this indie superhero, and just as Mark thinks that he has killed Freddy, he stands up in an unnatural manner and begins to play along with the whole graphic novel concept. In the original fight between these two, Freddy's choice was to become Super Freddy, and despite my love of Dream Child, even I can admit this is a bit too silly for the character. So instead of Super Freddy, this fight is going to be a much more horror-inspired way for the horror icon. Instead of bullets bouncing off of Freddy followed by cartoonish sound effects, the bullets are instead going to deal a lot of damage. A lot more damage than one would reasonably assume. Freddy is going to lose fingers, an ear, half his nose, both his eyes, and as his mangled body limps to the Phantom Prowler, he puts his gun to the base of Freddy's head and pulls the trigger. Mark walks away, spouting a generic action line, not seeing the sinister smile spread on Freddy's face as he morphs into a grotesque monster. Spider eyes sprout from his missing eye holes. The missing fingers return as bony claws. His ribcage audibly snaps, and we see his ribs move in a slimy fashion under his skin to emerge from his chest as a row of deadly pincers. Mark shoots more and more into Freddy, removing more and more of his body parts, only for them to be replaced with monstrous counterparts. All parts of his new body are visibly human, only deformed and placed seemingly at random. Fear fills Mark as he is unable to fight Freddy, and this bulky superhero outfit makes him unable to move quickly, allowing Freddy to get close and tear him to shreds, killing him in a gory display that paints the doodle world in a tint of red. Freddy morphs back to his usual self and laughs as he walks away from the pile of gore that was once the Phantom Prowler. We don't escape the dream world just yet as we cut to Alice sleeping at her desk as she lost the battle to stay awake. She finds herself in a movie theatre, with several of past Freddy victims filling the seats. She sits and watches the screen as a montage of Freddy's favourite kills plays, each member of the crowd having a visceral reaction to seeing their own death play out on screen. The image shifts to a location familiar to Alice, the diner at which she works, and suddenly a typhoon of wind picks her up and throws her towards the screen, where she suddenly finds herself sat at the bar to the diner, with Freddy digging into a serving of pizza topped with the heads of all his victims. We hear the painful screams from Kristen as Alice looks on in horror as Freddy impales her head and takes a prolonged bite of it to tease Alice for not being able to save her friends. He brought her here to thank her. Because of her, he has an entirely new menu of children to feed his appetite. He only wishes that she and her brother knew about him sooner. Think about how much stronger he would be if they were broadcasting the news about him for the last 5 years. Looking through the window at the diner, they all show different dreams from different students who overheard Rick shouting about Freddy earlier. And Freddy gives her the courtesy of letting her choose his next victim before he kills her. She audibly denies to name his next victim, but in a shaky and unsure voice as she looks to the ground in fear. Freddy gets close to her, his face just an inch away from hers as his bladed glove strokes through her hair. He tells her,
Fine. Then I guess I'll choose for myself.
As he says this, the doors to the diner open to reveal Carlos running through Freddy's boiler room in fear as Freddy runs through the doors to give chase. Alice finds herself tied to the countertop by a rope and desperately pulls at her arm to feebly try to free herself, but across the counter she sees a discarded steak knife just within reach. We cut to Freddy tormenting Carlos to draw as much fear from him as possible to make killing him and taking his soul taste so much sweeter. He forces the hearing aid in Carlos's ear to morph and deform into a device that completely returns his hearing. Too much in fact, as he's left with super hearing so powerful that a dripping faucet sounds like a beating drum to him. As Freddy continues to play with and torment Carlos, he gets ready to kill him, but before he is able to deal the killing blow, a remarkably determined Alice Arya starks him with a steak knife and cuts into his chest. As she pulls the blade free, we hear the cluster of screams from the tortured souls inside of Freddy. Alice is holding tight to Freddy to give another stab, but he manages to shake her off of him, her hand tearing her face free from Freddy's chest in the process. Freddy's joking nature takes a backseat as he suddenly becomes very serious, seeing that she is now holding one of his children. Lunging for her with his glove, he is tackled by Carlos, who screams for Alice to run. Knife still in hand, she is unsure of what to do: keep fighting Freddy and save Carlos, or do as Carlos says and save herself. At this point in her character arc, she has shown that she has started to stand up for herself, but isn't completely prepared to act on her words. In the original, she stays as an observer for most of the film. Only until all of her friends are dead does she suddenly develop a personality and go to fight Freddy. My version is showing a gradual growth to her fighting Freddy. She's just dealt her first blow against him but is unsure of what to do next, and it is that hesitation which almost gets her killed by Freddy before Carlos comes to her aid. The soul she took from Freddy calls out to her, telling her to run. She follows their orders and runs back to the diner as Freddy kills Carlos. As she bursts through the doors into the diner, she screams herself awake. Panting and trying to catch her breath back, she curls into a ball on the floor, crying over the loss of Carlos and hating herself for not doing more to stop him. Rick bursts into her room with a weapon in hand, thinking she was being attacked because of her scream, and then realises that she was screaming because of Freddy. After calming his sister down, they can still hear someone whimpering in the corner. As the twins investigate the third person in the room, they recoil in shock as they see a young woman covered head to toe in burn scars crying by herself in the corner. The girl is too badly scarred to make out if they recognise her or not. She looks like Freddy took great care to have her resemble him. They manage to calm her down enough to talk to her, and we learn who this person is who Alice saved. The soul of the person Alice pulled free from Freddy's body is none other than Nancy Thompson, who Freddy killed at the end of Dream Warriors and was the first person to ever defeat Freddy. Nancy is in constant pain. Her burned skin is fresh and is reacting to every movement she makes. The floor, the wall, even her own clothes are bringing her blinding pain every time she moves. So much as breathing is enough for her skin to rub against her clothes and hurt her. And the character every Nightmare fan knows more than any other is in a state of defeat and complete misery after a year of being Freddy's plaything. Through Nancy, we learn how Freddy came back this time. Fear is what attracts Freddy to you. If you aren't afraid of him, he can't find you. He's lost and trapped in the dream world if no one is afraid of him, an endless purgatory of his own making. He would have faded out of existence entirely if he couldn't feed on any fear. That is where the souls he has stolen comes into play. Over and over again he would free souls from his body and give them a chance of escaping. If they managed to run far enough so Freddy couldn't find them, then they would be free to move on to the afterlife. But Freddy always found them. He'd get bored and send multiple people free to run from him, but he always caught them and killed them over and over and over again, each time more painful than the last. She even alludes to instances where he grew bored of the chase and indulged in his more specific appetites from before he was killed. When Kristen couldn't let the memories of Freddy settle as Kincaid and Joey had, she acted as a lighthouse for Freddy and brought him back into the world. She looks directly at the twins. She tells them that they are his now. You can't beat Freddy. You can't run from Freddy. You can't kill Freddy. He'll always come back. Alice thinks to herself for a moment and realises something. She realises that if they aren't scared of Freddy, he will go away. The students who heard Rick talk about Freddy earlier have no reason to be afraid of him, so he can't draw power from them and come back if they beat him. The issue that comes from this is the souls he has taken. Alice freed Nancy, so surely there's a way to free the others. Alice thinks back to all the times where she let things happen to her and did nothing. Every day she watches her father drink himself to an early grave and blame her for it. She stood and watched as Kristen was killed. She watched as Freddy took Sheila and sucked the life out of her, while all she did was cry. She did something just now. She fought back and saved Carlos until becoming indecisive again. But in her one instance of fighting and standing up for herself and her friends, she freed one of Freddy's victims, and she's determined to do that again. That interaction is what closes off Act 2 and brings us to Act 3, which will primarily take place in the dream world. The clock is ticking before Freddy can make himself known to the dozens of other potential victims and instill them with fear of him. They have to go back into the dream here and now to stop Freddy, cut off his food supply and send him away for good. Filled with an unwavering determination, Alice asks Nancy to help them stop Freddy, who curls up further into the corner of the room mumbling, "Don't make me go back there, don't make me go back there, don't make me go back there," over and over again until finally she is screaming, don't make me go back, don't make me go back there." The more frantic she becomes, the more she is moving, and thus her tender and heavily burned flesh hurts and bleeds all the more. Alice calms her down and explains that they have just proved it is possible to rip souls free from Freddy. So what would happen if the souls ripped themselves free of him, from the inside? If she can go back to Freddy and pull all the souls together, they can fight Freddy from the inside, while she and Rick fight them from the outside. They aren't going to be afraid of him, and if Nancy can lead the souls to freedom, then he can't feed off of them either, making him just a weak old man who they can finally kill for good. Nancy sees the truth of what she is saying and agrees to help, wincing in pain as she grabs Alice's hand and the twins lie back to allow themselves to drift off into a deep sleep on the floor, Nancy's soul following them into their shared dream. In the dream, Freddy is already in the midst of taking his next victim, as we see him having strapped down an aspiring supermodel from the school. Similar to the scene in Dream Child, Freddy is force-feeding this young, borderline anorexic girl, but instead of Chef Fred stuffing her full of carbs, we instead see the malicious killer forcing her to eat human flesh. This both serves as to keep Freddy menacing and evil, while also showing his jolly side as he laughs with every bite given. And it serves as a metaphor for anorexia, as without nutrients, your starving stomach begins to eat itself to try to absorb as much nutrients as possible for the body. And in concept, it's a really brutal way to kill someone. Our heroes are too late to save her as she chokes to death on her mother's flesh. But before Freddy can take another victim, he hears the all too familiar voice as Nancy shouts his name. The world of the dream twists and bends to bring Freddy, his face completely serious, directly in front of Nancy. For defying him more than any other of his victims, he holds no joy in seeing her here to fight him again, and chooses not to be theatrical as he simply stabs her through the chest to take her soul back to join the rest. He is then met by a swift kick to the head as Rick jumps in to fight him, but Freddy is more powerful than ever with all of his new souls he has acquired this movie. Freddy steadily eases back into his joking nature and takes Rick to a Japanese-inspired location to fight, and despite Rick's best efforts, he is no match for Freddy. He plays with Rick for a while and stalks him through the dream until finally catching him in the middle of a crossroad that lead to all the dreams from his other potential victims. He is about to deal the killing blow against Rick when Alice comes in, having taken a katana from the walls and slices Freddy's arm clean off. Not bothering to pretend like it hurts him, he simply regrows his arm and pins both twins against the wall by the neck, aiming to kill them both through asphyxiation, and then get back to stalking his plethora of new prey. A look from Freddy tells the twins that something is wrong. He recoils his gloved hand in pain. Shaking it off, he looks back to the twins, who both hold weapons against him. A simple thought as Freddy turned those weapons into deadly snakes and spiders, leaving the twins helpless yet again. This final encounter with Freddy goes on for a few minutes longer, every so often Freddy recoiling in pain from an unseen force, until finally all of the souls within him are fighting back as one. The tortured souls reach out from his body and pin him in place. Hands reach out and pull at his flesh to try to open his body to free themselves. Rick stands back in awe as dozens of souls work in unison to help stop Freddy. But Alice isn't the type to hesitate anymore, and just as Freddy is about to get the souls back under control, she grabs his lower jaw and forces it open. With a loud snap, the jaw becomes unhinged, and as the burned and deformed hands of Kristen and Nancy reach out for his hanging jaw, the three of them are able to rip it clean off, providing a pathway for the souls to escape his body, leaving Freddy in a completely weakened state. Pulling himself together slowly, Freddy is met by the twins, and feeling no fear from them, he has no means of staying in the dream world. With no souls to pull fear from and no victims he can hunt, there is nothing tethering Freddy to their dreams, and he fades away, back to his boiler room, now with no souls for him to play with to draw power from, forcing him to live in an endless purgatory until finally fading from existence. The next day, the twins are paying their respect to their fallen friends. All seems well until the news begins to tell the story of the deaths that happened in Springwood this week. One story that grabs both of their attention is one about Mark's death, as he died alone in his workshop drawing comic panels of Freddy. The drawn image of the demonised Freddy fills the screen, and the story told in the images shows the demonised man being able to kill someone in their dreams. And this is being broadcast to the entire town, telling every child of Springwood who Freddy is and what he can do, surely frightening some of them. The screen cuts to black as Freddy's laughter plays. The fate of the Springwood children will be left ambiguous until we get to the event of Freddy vs. Jason, and see how the town of Springwood needed to purge all the children who ever knew about him by placing them into an asylum. Rounding this story up into a compact trilogy in the 80s and a continuation in the early 2000s as a final send-off to the franchise. And those are the changes I would make to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, keeping a basic continuity for Freddy's character and powers, offer a logical reason to how Freddy keeps coming back, and not let the characters fall into self-parody as so many horror icons have done so. I went with a quality over quantity approach to this adaptation, and I hope you all agree with my changes to the franchise. If you did like this video, then please subscribe to White Sunset and see more videos like it in the near future. Goodbye everyone.